listening to the Confronting Christianity podcast, and I'm already laughing because I am here with my friends Jen Wilkin, JT English, and Kyle Worley. Hopefully you guys listened to the previous episode we recorded where you heard Jen, JT, and Kyle's introductions of one another. And if you didn't, I'm just going to have you Google them because you were...
Oh, yeah, definitely do that. Yeah, okay. Always good advice, Rebecca.
No, okay, so don't Google somebody. Them. Instead, go to the Knowing Faith podcast, where these friends talk about the Bible in a very conversational, accessible, and exceedingly rich and helpful way. And I wanted to share with you guys before we start talking about the new resource that you've put together. Some of my friends who've recently become Christians have benefited tremendously from your work in Knowing Faith. In fact, for one young friend, it was one of her on-ramps to faith was listening to episodes of the Knowing Faith podcast. For another, it's something that she has been sort of mainlining, like she's been consuming, dozens and dozens of episodes as she has been trying to kind of reorient herself around faith in Jesus. So what you guys are doing is incredibly helpful and is changing the lives of real people on the ground, which I know you hear all the time, but our listeners may not know. So hopefully with that in mind, they can check out the Knowing Faith podcast. But yeah, I'd love for you guys to talk more. We talked on the last episode about the sort of trilogy of books that you guys have published, Remember and Rehearse, Form for Fellowship, and You Are a Theologian. But I would love for you guys to tell us more about the other resource that you have created together to help people, I guess, implement some of the ideas that you discuss in those books.
Well, kind of at like the genesis point of our partnership was what we now call the Deep Discipleship Program. It's kind of just right there at ground zero. Actually, probably the first lunch I ever had with JT, where it was just me and him, was a lunch where we took napkins and we wrote down what would go on to be the syllabus and like the actual first week all the way to the 24th week of the Deep Discipleship Program, which in our first version of it was 36 weeks long. It was very, very long. It's now
2.5 hours long.
And we've now tightened it up to 24. But so in some ways, like our whole friendship and partnership has kind of always had what we call the Deep Discipleship Program as a part of it. But JT, why don't you just kind of describe, like, I mean, it's kind of like at the seedbed of our partnership and friendship, but like what is it and why?
Yeah, that's right. Hopefully you've listened to some of what we've already talked about, but when I came to faith, not only did I have the chance to go to seminary, I was watching churches attempt to do something deeper. I mean, there was a lot of churches that had things like residency programs. They were trying to do institutes and, or they're trying to raise let's have 5, 6, 7, 8 people go through a really intense program. And I found those things really compelling because I believe that discipleship and theology should be best done and is best done in the life of the local church more than Bible colleges and more than seminaries. And so when I got this job at the previous church that the three of us were at, I thought, oh my goodness, I have a dream job. I get to create kind of a year-long, theologically immersive, biblically rich program that is centered around spiritual disciplines. And so I just was pumped and thrilled to do this. But then I got into my office, opened up a spreadsheet, and started thinking to myself, okay, what are we going to do for these notes? And realized real quickly, man, I can't create this program by myself. I need help. And so that's where Jen and Kyle really came in quickly of helping us think about what is this program going to be. And we built this program for the local church, like for our local churches. I've now taken this program and still teach it in my local church. At the end of this year, we'll have 1,000 graduates in it. Kyle at his church, he still has this program running in some capacity. And so we've seen this program over the course of a decade really produce rich discipleship in the life of the church, all centered around what we talked about in the last podcast: theological literacy, Bible literacy, and literacy around spiritual disciplines, what it means to kind of practice these habits. And really, Rebecca, over the course of the last 10 years, we had, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say hundreds of churches reach out and ask us, how can we do this? How can we do this in our church? And our instinct and heart has always been, you should build it. Man, we believe that God has gifted his church by the power of the Holy Spirit with its various members the resources to build these kinds of resources. And so we would encourage, we've actually coached, we've helped other churches do this. And one of the coolest things is a lot of churches have. I just got a text this morning from a church down in College Station. They're in their 7th year of the Institute, which is just so cool. They've built it themselves and they're resourcing themselves. It's awesome. But that being said, we also had a lot of churches say, we don't think we can do this. We don't think we can actually, whether it's the limitations of the pastor's just time constraints and what he's able to accomplish in a week, the financial resources of a church, even the theological competency for some leaders in churches. And so the reality is most churches have limited budget, limited staff. Maybe it's a home group leader who wants to do this and doesn't have the resources to do it. So about 2 years ago now, we had the opportunity to partner with Lifeway to take all that we had learned over the course of those previous 8 years of our institute space and put it into a discipleship program that we're now calling the Deep Discipleship Program. It's in its first year of being launched, and it is just one of the most, Rebecca, I got to tell you, before I let these two jabronis start talking, it is, I just can't tell you, like I get tears in my eyes when I'm on Instagram or when I get a text from somebody or an email, and it's like First Baptist, Paducah or whatever, I don't even know. And it's 14 people gathered together in a little church cafeteria, and they've got You Are a Theologian open or Forum for Fellowship open, and they're learning the Bible. And they'll say things like this in the DMs to me: we've been in church our whole lives, and we didn't know this. We cannot believe how rich theology is or how rich spiritual disciplines are. And so to see this program coming alive right now across the country and in some sense across the globe, it's just pure mercy, pure grace that God's let us be a part of this together. So that's been my experience. And it's so fun that it's now kind of out in the wild, hopefully blessing churches.
Jen, I know you guys originally met and started collaborating at quite a large church. And I think it was last year or earlier this year, I'm losing track of time, but I got to visit the church that you are currently part of, and it's quite a small church. So tell us about some of the distinctives there, or like to what extent does this vision change depending on the size of the church? Like, is there any change, or is this something that actually applies, as JT's been suggesting, kind of regardless of your church context?
Yeah, it is definitely scalable, and that's something that we've seen proved over time, and that's been really encouraging. I think it takes a well-resourced large church to pioneer something like this, because it's a commitment of resources. But I think some of what we felt was, much given, much required, and we really wanted to see how many churches we could get this into the hands of, because we had seen the impact that it had on a large church, but also, like, I would say we all saw the impact personally as well. I know JT's mom went through it one year. My husband went through it, was a table leader. And so I just, if people are listening and they're thinking, oh, this is just a sales pitch for another product, candidly, there are a lot of things that are marketed to people that are not tested. And this is not one of those things. We are not guessing that this content can help, because we know we have a lot of firsthand experience and experience seeing it play out in other churches. And so I think for us, it just feels like no risk, all reward to offer this to people. And again, like, just remember, what we're offering is not like a new program. These are ancient things. These are, the way I'll sometimes say it, is old things recently forgotten. And that's what we want to bring forward to another generation of Christians, because, all of the statistics are showing that our discipleship measures, that we're failing. And so we want to turn that around, and we believe this is a very meaningful first step. So yeah, my church is smaller, and I would say one of the ways that we see this play out is churches do maybe what we put together for a year or two until they get their sea legs, and then they begin to customize it perhaps to their own church environment. Maybe they have someone who realizes, oh, I could teach that session, or I could teach 6 sessions, or whatever it is. And we love that. But I would say one of the reasons that we put this together as something that was packaged was because of the recognition that the smaller the church, the less likely that they can bear the risk of launching something like this that's untested.
Kyle, as somebody who has started a church kind of from the ground up, well, first, just as a little light relief, I know I always ask you to tell us this, but it's just too funny. Please, would you tell us your near miss on the tagline for your church, and then I'm going to ask you a serious question.
Yes. This is such an important question, Rebecca.
It needs to be brought up as often as possible.
Yeah,
as often as possible.
Yeah, gosh. This is one of those stories that has overstayed its welcome. But so when
feels like we're still in the early years.
We knew we wanted to call the church Mosaic Church because what is a mosaic? It's bits and pieces that have been brought together in the hands of a master artist to create something beautiful.
He still loves the idea. You can hear it.
Yeah, I still do. On paper, it looks good. But so I was with some folks on our launch team. This is back in 2017. I'm thinking through, hey, the communications people tell me our church has to have a tagline. And we came from a church that had a really big communications department and everything had like a tagline. So they were like, you got to have a tagline. So I said, okay. So I spent a whole afternoon writing on a yellow legal pad. Here are my ideas, Mosaic Church, one in Christ, Mosaic Church, united but apart, or like all these different things. Like I written down a bunch of stuff, and I got to a small group from our launch team that night, and I said, hey, let me read out the ones that I have here. And I kind of put my favorite one as the middle one, because I didn't want to give it away, that it was my favorite one. And I had only written it down, hadn't said it out loud or anything like that. First group I'm talking to about it. So I read off the first one. It's kind of like, that's fine. I read off a few of them, and then I get to my favorite one, and I read it out. Mosaic Church, broken but whole. And on paper, that looks like broken, but whole. And when I said it out loud, somebody in the group goes, did you just say broken butthole? And I was like, no. And then we said, say it again. And so I did it again. And I was like, that's exactly what
I can hear it now.
I can hear it now.
And honestly, the logo doesn't help.
No, it doesn't. Once you look at the logo with the tagline, you're like, honestly, this is, yeah. So yes, thank you, Rebecca. There is.
So here's my serious question after that moment of levity. A lot of people think that in order to draw younger people, let's say Gen Z, into church, we need to make things really easy. Like we need to sort of lower the bar. We need to make things as sort of ask them, make as few demands of them as possible, essentially. And what you guys are talking about here with deep discipleship seems like a big ask. It seems like a lot. It seems like, hey, we're not asking for your Sunday mornings. we're asking for you to actually like reshape your entire lives. So tell us, Kyle, like, do you think it's right that in order to reach younger people in particular, we need to lower the bar, or is that the wrong answer?
No, I think it's demonstrably untrue. I think that all the data tells us that younger generations are looking for something that is more all-encompassing and totalizing. And I don't think that's surprising. They've had like generational fracturing of the biblical story. There's a lack of internal coherence in the witness they've seen. And so they're looking for something that feels like, oh, wait a second, how do all these pieces fit together at a story level, at a doctrinal level, and then at a existential or just human level, practical level? Like, how does it play itself out? Our experience has been overwhelmingly that younger generations are like very keyed up to do this. If anybody has had a hard time to like for us to communicate the value of this, it has been older generations. And that's not a slight on older generations. It's just I don't know that they were as primed for something like this as younger generations were. We can get into a lot of cultural and kind of ideological reasons why that is or might be the case. But I will say that we have found consistently, and this is across the board demographically, and it would hold true for young folks as well, or Gen Z as well, is that if you raise the bar and you give them something that is accessible but sacrificial, because that's how we built the Deep Discipleship Program. The Deep Discipleship Program is not easy, and it's not designed to be easy. It is designed to be sacrificial but accessible. This is the problem that we missed generation or two ago. We said doctrine had to be sacrificial, like to really dive deep, it needed to be sacrificial. And then we made the routes to do it completely inaccessible to the overwhelming majority of normal people. So like we paired the sacrifice that is required to dive deep with a level of inaccessibility that isn't required to dive deep. That's like how the seminary system is built. Move here, pay large sums of money, potentially go into debt, move away from your home church, and you have to really treat this full time. And honestly, we don't have a lot of spaces for people with non-normative abilities or women. I mean, that's just kind of how it was. It's kind of like, if you're young and if you're a woman, we're not really engineered for you. So not only is it going to be sacrificial, it's going to be like,
and there's not a job on the other side of this.
And there's not a job. So it's like, so we made something that was already inherently sacrificial. We made it inaccessible. The Deep Discipleship Program is not trying to limit that sacrificial nature at all. To dive deep requires sacrifice. The program is built for people who want to make that sacrifice to dive deep, but it is accessible. And that, I think, is what's been unique about this program, both in our historic offerings and our churches, and now as we've built it with Lifeway to make it available to other churches across the country, to say it is good for you to call your people to dive deep with all the sacrifices that entails. We want to make that invitation as accessible as possible. And that's what we've accomplished with this program. And that's what we're hearing from churches that are already using it. That's been our road-tested experience with it. So whether young, old, male, or female, neither Jew nor Greek nor barbarian nor Scythe nor male nor female, everybody is invited to dive deep with all the sacrifice that entails, and we think that door should be flung wide open.
Tell us a bit more. So you keep using the language of sacrificial, and clearly, like, one of the central features of discipleship for Christians is, as Jesus put it, like, anyone who wants to come after me must deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. That there is a central idea of us being ready to offer up our lives for Jesus, who offered his whole life for us. That there's a sort of response there of not just like, oh, I'll give you the edges of my time and the spare change that I have and the odd thought that might sort of pass through my mind, but actually that if we've trusted in Jesus, then he owns us body and soul. He made us, he bought us, he gave himself for us, and we give all of ourselves to him. But when you're talking about this particular program, calling for sacrifice, unpack a little bit more of what that means.
This is something that's been, in particular, speaking for the older generation, which Kyle referenced. This has been something that was left out in terms of something that we were going to lay down, or an aspect of our lives is going to be transformed, and that's to being transformed by the renewing of our minds. And so many of us think, well, I mean, if God wants me to know the Bible, then he's not going to make it hard for me. It should just be easy. I should be able to read it and just take away what I need for the next 24 hours and then come back 24 hours later and do the same thing. And so a lot of us were discipled into what I'll sometimes just call quiet time culture. And again, there's nothing wrong. There's actually much benefit to having a daily practice of going to the scriptures. But, the idea of doing things in community also plays into this as well. But one of the problems with quiet time culture, at least historically, is that it was more focused on generating a positive emotion than on forming your mind. That's a lot of devotional material. So to new Christians who are listening to this, I would urge you to avoid picking up devotional content as your first introduction to how to read the scriptures, because it can set you back by years. You need better frameworks before you do that.
And when you say devotional content, Jen, for those for whom that means nothing, just unpack exactly what you mean.
So a bite size, something you read that you read, maybe you read a couple verses and then there's a little, here's how this should make you feel, and now pray this prayer, and then you come back and there's a different bite-sized verse from another part of the Bible. And then the next day, a different verse. And imagine, like, if you were trying to learn algebra and this was your approach to learning algebra, right? Like, you turn to chapter 5 and read a paragraph and ask how it should change your life. And then the next day you turn to chapter 1 and so on and so forth. And what Christianity has downplayed for the last 30 or 40 years is that there's actual learning involved. And so, like, JT and Kyle are pastors who preach. The three of us, we are educators who teach. And in Christian spaces, the idea of the church being a means of educating people, that the life of the mind is important and is not antithetical to our emotions, but actually informs and supports our emotions, is something that we are all three trying to reclaim for the church. And we're not embarrassed about it. And anything good that you have ever learned and put into practice was hard to learn. You felt dumb when you first started, and it got easier, but never easy over time. And so to reframe what it means to be a disciple as primarily, not entirely, but as primarily a learner is a big piece of what we are wanting to restore. So my generation was not told that. We were told, in particular, women were told, bring your feelings to church. I want your feelings to come to church. But in order to feel deeply about God, we need to think deeply about God. And so that's the work that we're trying to do. And the longer you've been out of a classroom setting, the longer it might take you to readjust to thinking of that being an aspect of being a follower of Christ.
Yeah, it's a humbling experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. Again, everything Jen said, yes. I'd also just say from a philosophy of ministry perspective, like when I was coming into kind of evangelical Christianity in the early 2000s, so much of our philosophy of ministry was based upon ease and accessibility, in the sense of like, would you maybe please consider coming to this 30-minute Bible study on Ephesians? We know you have a lot going on, and we really don't think the Bible is all that important, but like, we want you to come. We're going to have pizza. We're going to play a game called Chubby Bunny. We're going to make sure that like...
I dominated at that.
For real. And like, I mean, we should play. Bring it on. And that, for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, God bless you. You don't need to know what I'm talking about, because that's a weird evangelical culture that, Lord willing, we're leaving behind. But so many ministries, I think, thought, I don't think they were thinking consumeristically. They were trying to think intentionally by engaging. They were hearing, we're too busy, our family's overcommitted, we have too much going on. And so the idea was, let's just give people the lowest common denominator Christianity. But what's happened over the course of the last 20 or 30 years is lowest common denominator Christianity has resulted in lowest common denominator disciples. And what we found is it's not that people don't want to do hard things. They do. They don't want to do hard things that they think don't matter. And what we've unintentionally communicated in the church over the course of the last 20 or 30 years is this doesn't really matter that much. If you've professed faith in Christ, you can just kind of go about your life and it's going to be fine. And what we're trying to say is, no. Conversion is just the first part of being a disciple of Jesus. It's now time for you to take your next step in a deeper love and knowledge of God. And it's time for the church's ministries to facilitate that for you, to actually ask you to do something meaningful, important. I mean, I pastor here in Colorado, and my people want to do meaningful things. They want to go hike 14ers. They have their kid on the travel baseball team. They want to do CrossFit and drink kale smoothies. They've been told like that they're supposed to do hard things and meaningful things. And a lot of the churches in the area have an exact opposite philosophy of ministry. We're going to accommodate their hard lifestyle by giving them simple, easy Christianity. I think that's the exact wrong message. I think we need to reverse course and say, no, we want to raise the bar for you in the life of the church. We do want to ask you to carry your cross, to sacrifice your life, to change your calendar, to change what you care about, to transform your mind, to come and learn humbly at the feet of scriptures who Jesus is and why you should follow him. So that's what this was an attempt to do. It was to say, this isn't lowest common denominator. Let's appropriately raise the bar. To what Kyle said earlier, let's make it accessible for every believer. There's not a Christian who couldn't do this program. This could be for brand new Christians, brand new believers. The material isn't over their heads. It's going to ask you to step up a little bit, but it's certainly doable and accessible. So that was really the vibe behind what we were trying to do. How do we not overreact to a lowest common denominator Christianity, but how do we appropriately raise the bar to help create a discipleship dissonance for people?
Yeah, it was really interesting to me, JT, you mentioned families feeling like they're too busy to really meaningfully engage. And, you know, because of the travel sports team, or because of the whatever programs we're in, or whatever, you know, 14ers we're climbing, etc. And listeners to the Confronting Christianity podcast may feel like I'm a broken record on this, but I think one of the things that followers of Jesus in the year of our Lord 2025 need to remember and re-understand from the scriptures is that your family isn't just, if you're married, you know, you and your husband or wife and your however many children. It actually is the local church. And to land this plane, I actually want to tell a little story about Jen, which really moved and struck me. So as I mentioned, I got to visit Jen's church a few months ago, and I got to have dinner in her home with not only some of her immediate family, but also with some of her church family. And there was a moment during dinner where one of the young people there, a teenage boy, passed his phone to Jen so that she could review a text message that he was like considering sending to a girl. And one of the things that sort of struck me there is, this is a young man who knows Jen as a older sister in the Lord, and trusts her to give him meaningful advice about his, like, the things that are close to his heart, like what's really going on with him in his relationship world and in his school world. And that moment is built on many moments of a deep seriousness about church family and about the fact that if we're followers of Jesus, we're all in this together and we all have a part to play. Whatever our age, whatever our background, whether we're married or single, whether we're grandparents as Jen has just become for the 6th time only today, or whether we're children, that we actually all have a part to play in one another's discipleship and in one another's growth in the Lord and in one another's kind of mission in the world, and that we all belong to one another and we can't do this without one another. And so if you're listening to this and you're someone who considers yourself a Christian, and maybe you go to your local church on a Sunday morning because you kind of know that that's what Christians should do, that's great, but don't think of it as a thing that you go to on a Sunday. Think of it as like, this is a community to which I belong and where people here need me and I need them. And if you're not yet a follower of Jesus, imagine a world in which you are actually called into relationship with people, young and old, from all sorts of different backgrounds, both socioeconomically and racially, and in terms of their backgrounds of faith, called together to an extraordinary mission to change the world, not in your own strength, but in the strength of the man who died 2,000 years ago without ever having written a book or ruled an empire or sat on a throne or led an army, and who has by any measure changed the world more than any other human in the history of the world. If you are looking for a vision to live by, a love to center around, a truth to build your life on, then maybe Jesus is that truth. And maybe you can encounter him in the context of a local church. So I would just encourage you, again, if you're not yet a follower of Jesus, or you're not yet somebody who's knocked on the door of your local church and sort of asked the people there, the strange and disappointing people you will find there, if you can join them, I would encourage you to do that. If you are already a follower of Jesus, and especially if you're somebody who has any kind of leadership role in your local church, I would really commend to you the resource that Kyle and JT and Jen have put together, and this just a program for helping people understand what deep discipleship looks like, what it means to follow Jesus in the context where you live, and how does that work out as we love God and seek to know him more, and as we seek to love and know one another. Jen, JT, Kyle, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for all the work that you guys do to serve the church, both locally and globally, actually. I'm sure there are people around the world, way beyond the shores of America, who are benefiting from your work. You guys have been listening to or watching the Confronting Christianity podcast. You can follow us on X or Instagram. You can subscribe on YouTube. But between now and the next time I speak into your earphones, just consider what it would look like to really put your entire calendar, your entire thought world, your entire life into the hands of the one who died for you 2,000 years ago.